So it's been a while since I made a video, but I got it back in the shop, so I figured I'd just make a quick one. Just doing some like maintenance stuff. I'm changing the tires out, and I finally cracked one of my plastic floorboards. I figured it was kind of going to happen eventually. I don't even know what I cracked it on, to be quite honest, but I did crack it pretty good up that seam, so probably going to just drift stitch it back together for now. And as you can see, I kind of marked out my trim lines so that when I put the bigger 28s back on, hopefully it doesn't rub in the front, because I just got a little bit of rub in the front at full compression, so hopefully that gets rid of that. I'll trim the front and the back just a hair, but I'll probably in the future eventually splurge on some like Pine Ridge floorboards, or maybe some I don't know, maybe some wild boar if I decide to go cheaper. There's a bunch of different ones, but for now, hopefully this will keep the rubbing to a minimum and drift stitch that back together, and it'll be good to go. And another thing, I did, so I've had the DP brakes on here for a little while. I went on some trail riding up in Michigan over the 4th, and I was a little worried just because it's so sandy up there that it would eat into my pads, but these DP brakes have been doing really good. They grab pretty phenomenal, and all 3 corners seem to have great pad life left. They almost look new still, so I've been super happy with that. Big upgrade over the stocks that wore out probably within 200 miles. And then I had a set of race drivens which used to be good but are now pretty much just Chinese junk, and those lasted probably another 200 miles and were junk. So now I think I'm at like 600 miles, and these are looking really good. And I do a lot of, you know, like sandy riding, trail riding, like some mud riding, some water riding, so my brakes usually take a beating, but these have lasted pretty good so far. And another thing, I changed out the brake cap reservoir. I don't know what the deal was, but it was leaking out of the weep holes on the side. So just like a bunch of stupid maintenance stuff. I hoping it was just the seal. The seal looked like it was a little indented, like the little accordion seal that goes in there. So I'm hoping that that fixes that. I squeezed the lever a bunch, and I'm not getting any brake fluid seepage anymore, so that's good. So hopefully that's fixed. And lastly, kind of a maintenance thing, I picked this up on Amazon. It was just a cheapo, or maybe eBay, one of the two. You can find them anywhere. Just a cheapo wheel bearing greaser. But the cool thing about this is these new designs is you're supposed to be able to just take this hub off, slide this basically over the axle into the knuckle, like into the wheel bearing, and you can pump it full of grease without pulling the axle out. All the other tools that used to exist, the older tools, you had to pull the whole half shaft out and then basically stick the tool into all the way into the bearing, into the knuckle, and then pump it and put your axle back in, which was never super appealing to me, so I never did it, because that's a pretty hefty job pulling all the axles just to grease the wheel bearing. So I just kind of said screw it, since I'm hard on it anyways. But with this tool, it was like 20 bucks too, something really cheap. So hopefully with that, I'll be able to get some grease in these wheel bearings and make them last a little longer. There's like some seals on it and a little tiny like pilot screw hole drilled through, so it should be able to pump into that center groove, because it's a split wheel bearing in the center, so hopefully that'll fill that center groove up and push some grease into there. But for now, that's it. I'll probably do a short cut to when I put the new tires on, and hopefully with all the trimming done and shit to make it clear, so you can see how I did that after this. So I'm back, and after starting this, I realized I'm kind of a dumbass. There's no way you can have the axle completely in and get this tool in, obviously, just the way the shaft is supported in the knuckle. I don't know why I was thinking it would fit in between there, but I was able to not have to pull the entire knuckle assembly off or the axle out, which I think is a plus, because the amount of tore into this thing, I'm getting pretty good at taking it apart. So the front end's really not bad at all. You could probably do this in 15 minutes, have the tire off and all this stuff. So shock bolt, Obviously brake's got to come off. The big nut, where is it? The big castle nut for the brake hub, the wheel hub, it's got to come off. Spacer washer, it'll come off with it. Cotter pins on everything. I took my tie rods off so I could articulate this a little better. I left my upper ball joint in because that is a pain in the butt. The lower one has like a tangent bolt kind of thing that goes in through like a pinch bolt. And the knuckle, you can see it right there, goes in there and clamps the knuckle. That one's easy to get out. That you just zip that bolt out and you can tap this with a hammer and your control arm should fall right down. So after you get the shock off and all this extra crap off, the only thing other thing I didn't take off, so upper ball joint and sway bar links I didn't touch. So now this has turned into a longer video than I wanted it to be, but with all that stuff off, you can kind of pick up the knuckle and rotate it out, and you'll see it pulls the bearing out slightly, and you can actually push. Tough to do it with one hand, but you can actually pick up and push the axle in, and then you can slide this, which fits over the threads but not the splines. So this will fit like this kind of, and you just kind of, I was just using one hand to hold this kind of all together because the axle is going to want to push back into the hole of the bearing. But you can kind of use one hand to squeeze it and hold it together, and then use your other hand to pump the grease if you got a halfway decent grease gun. That'll stay on the Zerk. If not, it'll be a two-buddy job. But yeah, I don't know. Let's see if I can set the phone down real quick and get this popped out here. Yeah, there we go. So now you can see I've got the control arm, upper control arm picked up a little bit. And I'm just holding it in with my thumb right now. But you would basically slide the tool in over the splines and into the bearing. I already greased the front too. Yeah. So I just held it together with my hand and pumped it until it started to bust grease out. It did seem like it tightened up the bearings quite a bit. They seem pretty dry, so I'm happy about that. I am not upset that I did it because doing this way, like I said, it's really not hard to get all this stuff apart and then back together, especially without screwing anything up. The other side, I've already got the axle back seated in where it goes. I just have to hook everything back up. And that should do her. For the rears, it's gonna be a little more tricky. Still gonna have to take the brake hub off, brake off this side. Other side doesn't have that stuff, so that, or the other side doesn't have the brake. Sorry, that just the caliper's missing and the rotor. You still gotta take the wheel hub off, and we'll pull our big 6 bolts out is what I'm planning on doing, and take the hitch receiver off. And once I get that out, I'm thinking, like before when I did my pinion seal, I'm thinking I can just slide this baby back. Hopefully my exhaust isn't in the way now. These umpires, we'll see how that turns out. I think it'll be fine. But I do remember this plate has to come off, so that might be a little trickier now. But hopefully get these big bolts out, slide the diff back, and get these axles to pop out of the trailing arms, because the control arms in the front, it's not that bad. You can just drop the lower. Back, these trailing arms, I've had them off before. They're a little bit of a pain in the ass, and I'd really rather not mess with them just to grease these wheel bearings. That's just too much work for me. So I'm gonna try that and see if I can get these axles to just slide back when I slide the diff back, pop them out, because that's exactly how I did the pinion seal. Hopefully, the only thing I'm questioning is if my drive shaft has enough yoke, slip yoke in it, so that I pull this back and I don't have to take the drive shaft out, but I suppose we will find out. So quick update if you're following along with me for the wheel bearing service on all 4 corners. So I got the front all put back together. The hubs are all put back on and stuff. This big axle nut, remember, is like 150 foot-pounds. It's a hefty torque for these. I ended up using like a big bar and just stuck it kind of in between the studs like that. Obviously, I'm fortunate enough to have it on a lift, but I suppose you could do this on the ground too if you had it just on jack stands or something, and brace it against the ground. And that way you're not trying to stick all that load through the drivetrain when you're torquing that up, because that's a lot of torque for just a four-wheeler. So I got the fronts all put back together. Just the cotter pins have to go back in. The rear, I ended up pulling the entire axles and diff out as a unit. So that means I took the little bolt that goes into the pinion from the drive shaft out, so that could slide this back. You have to pull the breather tube off, and you have to take the hubs off just like we did on the front. Just that big axle nut comes off, take your cotter pin out, and should slide off, minus the brake caliper on the right side. But other than that, it was a bit of a battle to get the diff slid back, but so you just kind of pry it and slowly like jiggle it and pull it, it'll come out, but it wasn't super fun either. And besides that, with the axles out, I was able to completely service these. I ended up popping this outer race out, inner race, but the outer one, since there's two bearings actually. So inner race of the outer bearing, and I cleaned it out because there's kind of some contaminants and they were turning a little hard. It just felt gritty. So I cleaned it out, sprayed it all out with air like multiple times, and then repacked this outer cage full of grease by hand, put my cage back in, this race over into the cage, and then I took my tool and just completely pumped these full of grease, like until they could take no more. It was squirting out this side, and it pushed out this back side too, and quite a bit of dirt and contaminants came out. So I was pretty happy that that pushed all that stuff out, and now it's basically completely full of grease and ready to go. So it should be less perceptible to let in more, you know, water and mud and junk. So did that on both sides, and now I'm gonna get it hopefully put back in. So that should wrap this up pretty much for the most part. I know I kind of glossed over some stuff, but you kind of get the idea. And here's the finished product with everything back together. Bearings all greased, 28s are on, fenders trimmed. I got that drift stitched up where I cracked the footwell, so she should be ready to go. Hopefully in the future I can probably upgrade to some 30s. I'm hoping do some floorboards and do 30s, and that'll give me a little more ground clearance, because right now on the 28s I just catch A-arms on a lot of stuff, so it'd be nice to have just a little bit of extra ground clearance. And I don't think I'll have a problem on the stock clutches with 30s, especially on Aztecs, just because they're so light. But that should wrap this one up. Thanks for watching.